Moments ago, a political earthquake shook the very heart of Westminster. Reports have emerged that King Charles, the nation's most prominent symbol of tradition and authority, held a secret high-stakes meeting with Nigel Farage, the firebrand former MEP and Brexit champion. Inside government circles, panic erupted almost instantly. Ministers were blindsided. Whispers of betrayal echoed through the corridors of power, and Starmer's inner circle scrambled to assess the damage, the secrecy of the meeting, the unusual choice of location away from public scrutiny, and the timing. Mere weeks before critical votes on national security and Brexit-related legislation have ignited an unprecedented storm. Social media exploded with speculation, images of Downing Street and Buckingham Palace trending within minutes as ordinary citizens tried to piece together what could only be described as a historical confrontation. The message was clear. This was not a routine discussion. This was a political statement. Farage, known for his relentless attacks on Starmer's government and his ability to mobilise public outrage, appeared to have secured direct access to the monarchy in a way that no politician in modern British history has. And the question that now haunts every corner of the nation is simple yet terrifying. Why? What could have been discussed behind closed doors that required the king himself to intervene? Inside Downing Street, the mood is described as chaotic and frozen at the same time. Cabinet ministers have reportedly been summoned to emergency meetings, unable to comprehend the scale of the breach. Starmer, usually calm and measured, is said to be furious, his trusted aides scrambling to understand whether this was a personal affront, a calculated political manoeuvre, or a warning from the monarchy itself. Sources suggest that aides were forced to shred sensitive briefing papers in panic, fearing leaks that could further fuel national outrage. The Labour Party's communication team is now locked in crisis mode, carefully crafting messages while trying to downplay the incident, knowing full well that the public will interpret silence as weakness. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage's inner circle is reportedly celebrating, seeing the encounter as a symbolic victory, a royal endorsement, direct or implied, of a political ideology that challenges Starmer's leadership. The optics alone have shattered expectations. The king, often perceived as above politics, sitting down in secrecy with a figure who has been at the forefront of political rebellion and Brexit agitation, creates a moral and constitutional dilemma that is sending shockwaves across the nation. Public reaction has been swift, emotional, and deeply divided. Royalists, patriots, and anti-Brexit factions alike are scrambling to interpret what they have only just learnt. Calls for explanations are flooding MPs' offices, journalists are racing to secure details, and conspiracy theories are multiplying at an alarming rate. Some commentators suggest this is the culmination of months of frustration over Starmer's policies, his approach to immigration, the economy, and EU negotiations, while others warn that this represents a fundamental challenge to parliamentary authority itself. Newspapers are already speculating on potential resignations, realignments, and historic power shifts. Experts note that any perceived collusion between the monarchy and a political figure is likely to spark debates about the very foundations of Britain's democracy, possibly redefining the balance of power between elected officials and the crown. Within hours, leaks began surfacing, hinting at discussions on electoral strategy, controversial legislation, and warnings about the direction of the country under Starmer's leadership. Each revelation added fuel to a fire that is spreading faster than anyone in Westminster anticipated. Even more concerning for Starmer's government is the timing. Parliament faces a series of critical votes in the coming days, including budgetary approvals and security legislation that could define the Labour Party's legacy. The secrecy of this meeting suggests it was not just a casual discussion, but a prelude to a confrontation that could reshape UK politics entirely. Ministers reportedly fear that any misstep in addressing the fallout could trigger resignations, public outrage, or even a collapse in confidence. Political analysts are calling this one of the most extraordinary events in recent British history, a convergence of monarchy, rebellion, and government panic that could redefine public trust and alter the course of the nation. The question, now dominating conversations from the palace to Parliament, is chilling. What demands did the King convey, and how far will Starmer's government bend under pressure? Were they warned, threatened, or simply advised? And most importantly, will this secret meeting be the spark that ignites a chain reaction, threatening the very stability of the government? Every layer of secrecy, every hidden corridor conversation, and every anxious briefing now points to a singular, urgent truth. Britain is standing on the precipice of political chaos. The public, already exhausted by years of uncertainty, is witnessing history unfold in real time, a collision of tradition, rebellion, and leadership failure that could define the next decade. Social media reactions oscillate between outrage, confusion, and fervent speculation. Calls for transparency echo across the nation as newspapers, commentators, and ordinary citizens demand answers. Meanwhile, the implications extend beyond party politics. This is a confrontation that challenges the moral and constitutional framework of the country itself. Was this an endorsement of Farage's ideology, a subtle warning to Starmer, or a complex negotiation over the future of Britain's democratic institutions? Within hours, the story has spread to international media, drawing reactions from Europe and even the United States, amplifying the tension and placing the UK in a global spotlight. As the nation waits, the tension is almost unbearable. Will Starmer publicly address the King's meeting with Farage, or will silence signal submission? Are secret alliances forming in the shadows that could reshape elections, policies, and the very notion of parliamentary sovereignty? One thing is certain, the political landscape has shifted in a way that few anticipated, and the ramifications could be historic. The question now hangs over every household, every political office, and every citizen who cares about the future of the UK. What happens next, and how far is the monarchy willing to go to influence the course of the nation? Within hours of news leaking about the secret meeting between King Charles and Nigel Farage, the political atmosphere across Westminster descended into chaos. Starmer's government, long accustomed to controlling the narrative, now found itself scrambling to regain authority. But every move seemed to deepen the crisis. Cabinet ministers reportedly huddled in emergency meetings, faces pale, voices tense, papers shuffled frantically as aides attempted to draft statements that could calm a nation already on edge. The corridors of power were filled with whispers of betrayal, rumours of leaks, and the unmistakable fear that this was no ordinary political setback. The opposition seized the moment mercilessly. Farage's allies, emboldened by the unprecedented access to the monarchy, began publicly questioning Starmer's loyalty, his competence, and even the very legitimacy of his leadership. Parliamentary debates, normally procedural and predictable, turned into tense battlegrounds of accusation and outrage. Every question posed to ministers now carried the weight of history, each word scrutinised for hints of weakness, each pause interpreted as the confirmation of collusion or collapse. Across the nation, the media amplified the shock in real time. Newspapers splashed headlines suggesting that the monarchy had intervened directly in political affairs, a scenario almost unthinkable in modern Britain. Television panels buzzed with speculation about what might have been discussed during the secret meeting. Analysts debating whether this represented a subtle warning or an explicit threat to Starmer's authority. Social media, of course, erupted in a frenzy. Hashtags calling for transparency, resignations, and even early elections began trending within minutes, fueling a fire that seemed impossible to contain. Public outrage spread not only in London but across the country, from towns and villages to major cities, as ordinary citizens tried to reconcile the idea that the king, a figure traditionally above politics, might be taking sides in a moment of national decision. The moral and constitutional implications were dizzying. For decades, the monarchy had been a stabilising force, a symbol of continuity and impartiality. Now the very image of neutrality was shattered, leaving the government exposed and the people uncertain about the rules of power in their own country. Inside Starmer's inner circle, panic reportedly escalated with alarming speed. Aides described the Prime Minister as furious and unnerved. pacing corridors, demanding immediate briefings, and questioning every move made in the past months. Rumours circulated that key members of the cabinet were contemplating resignations, fearing that their association with a government seen as weakened or compromised could destroy their careers. Sources suggest that ministers were given direct instructions to prepare for the worst-case scenario, a public showdown in Parliament. In Parliament, a vote of no confidence or a wave of defections to other parties, most likely Reform UK or even a revived Brexit-aligned coalition. The stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. Starmer had long presented himself as a stabilising figure, a measured leader, capable of guiding the country through turbulent times. Now, every decision was scrutinised, every action measured against the backdrop of a secret royal intervention and the fear that the foundations of his authority could collapse in hours. Meanwhile, whispers of what was actually discussed during the meeting began leaking into the public domain, though details remained frustratingly vague. Sources close to Farage hinted at topics ranging from electoral strategy to national security concerns, from warnings about parliamentary overreach to the economic risks posed by Starmer's policies. Some reports even suggested that King Charles may have offered guidance on how to navigate looming political crises, a suggestion that sent shockwaves through ministers sworn to uphold parliamentary supremacy. Critics immediately accused the king of undermining democracy, arguing that a constitutional monarch should never involve themselves directly in political disputes, regardless of intent. Supporters countered that this was a historic moment of moral leadership, a rare intervention meant to steer the country away from potential catastrophe. The polarisation was immediate and intense. Every broadcast, every tweet, every article seemed to push the narrative further toward confrontation, as public perception became its own battlefield. Outside Westminster, protests began forming spontaneously. Crowds gathered in central London, waving banners, chanting slogans and demanding clarity from both the government and the Monarchy. Reports indicated that some demonstrations turned heated, with police struggling to maintain order as the tension spilled into the streets. Ordinary citizens, long disillusioned by political stagnation, were suddenly thrust into the centre of a story that felt historic, urgent and morally significant. The narrative was no longer simply about policy disagreements or party politics. It had become a question of trust, loyalty and the very principles upon which Britain's democracy rested. International observers were watching closely. European capitals monitored the situation with concern, while American media outlets highlighted the unprecedented nature of a monarch meeting a political firebrand in secret. Diplomats whispered about the potential ramifications for trade, security and foreign relations, all hinging on a conversation that had taken place behind closed doors. Starmer himself appeared increasingly isolated. Sources indicate he spent the night in consultation with only a handful of trusted aides, attempting to craft a response that could halt the momentum of the growing scandal. Yet every proposed strategy seemed insufficient. Denial could appear weak, acknowledgement could appear submissive, and any attempt to redirect the narrative risked inflaming a public already primed for outrage. Cabinet members reportedly feared that even small missteps could trigger resignations en masse, creating a cascade that might render the government virtually ineffective. The opposition, led by Farage, seized every opportunity to escalate the tension, portraying Starmer as a leader out of control, struggling to maintain authority against forces far larger than himself. Analysts called it the most serious crisis in modern British politics, a moment in which the moral authority of the monarchy collided directly with the operational authority of the government, leaving the country in limbo and its citizens desperate for clarity. The implications for upcoming votes and legislation are staggering, with Parliament distracted, confidence shaken and ministers unsettled. Critical bills face unprecedented uncertainty. Economic policy, national security decisions and even routine parliamentary procedure could now be influenced by the ripple effects of this clandestine meeting. Every observer, from the media to ordinary citizens, senses that the balance of power may have shifted in ways that are irreversible. And as the nation waits, the question that hangs over every decision, every speech and every briefing is terrifyingly clear. Has Starmer's government already lost control of its destiny? And what what will the king do next to ensure that the course of the nation aligns with what he sees as Britain's best interests? By the early hours, the full scale of the crisis had begun to crystallise. News of King Charles's secret meeting with Nigel Farage had spread like wildfire, and the reverberations were now impossible to contain. Starmer's government was caught in a perfect storm of outrage, mistrust and political paralysis. Cabinet ministers, once confident in their ability to navigate controversies, were now described as fractured and terrified, moving through Westminster like a team on the brink of collapse. Every corridor echoed with anxious conversations, whispered fears of resignations, and frantic strategies for damage control that could no longer keep pace with the growing wave of scrutiny Starmer himself was reportedly forced into and confronted with a confrontation that seemed to define the essence of power, loyalty and governance. The drama was no longer theoretical, it was tangible, unfolding live and impossible to ignore. Every decision, every statement, every silence was being interpreted as a moral and political act, a judgment on character, competence and the very future of democratic Britain. As the day wore on, the tension showed no sign of easing. Starmer's aides reportedly scrambled to prepare a public response, but the parameters of the crisis had shifted. Every potential message risked inflaming anger, every action could be read as capitulation, and every delay threatened further erosion of credibility. Opposition parties sensed opportunity. Farage and his allies framed the event as proof of Starmer's failure, while sympathetic commentators hinted at a reassertion of royal authority in moments of national peril. In homes, offices and media studios across the country, the nation seemed united in its anxiety as citizens watched history unfold in real time, waiting for the next act in a drama whose stakes were nothing less than the stability of the government and the moral authority of the monarchy itself.